Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. This is Behind the Grind. And hey, we've got a special treat for you guys today because we have one of the best guests in all the fantasy football industry. His friends may know him as one spicy tomato, but the rest of us know him as the host of NFL Live and the Fantasy Football Podcast there over on ESPN. He is often imitated, but never duplicated. And the best thing to come out of Wesleyan University, he is the one and only Field Yates. How you doing, Field?
I'm doing great. Thank you to you all, not just for having me on, but for also waking up early. As though we've got several time zones. I think we have at least 3 time zones accounted for during this taping. So everybody who woke up early, most specifically Major, serious props to you for doing exactly that.
Yeah.
don't give Major any more credit because that's going to go right to his head, and then he's going to hold it over us for the rest of the season here as we continue our recording.
It's already on wax, man. He already said it.
There you go. No taking it back now. Yeah.
So those of us that are tuning in for the first time to this series, this is kind of where we go in and get to know the analyst, and we're going to dive right in here and go behind the grind there with Field Yates. And we're going to start off with the easiest question, probably my favorite question when it's all broken down. It's, what would your intro music be if you're coming in to close out the 9th inning of a ball game, or if you're like a WWE superstar? What would that song be to kind of introduce you?
Ooh, that's a good question. That is not an easy question, though, because there are so many ways that you could take it. And you know, I grew up in Boston, so if I said Enter Sandman, which would be a nod to Mariano Rivera, I think it would be sacrilege. But I do feel like that is the most iconic music that anybody has entered to close out a game, at least over like the past 25 or so years. So I'm trying to think of a song that would fire me up and get me going. You know what? It's actually probably not a song that would fire up most people, but there's a song, my 38 special, called Caught Up in You, that I can listen to endlessly. I'm not sure it fires anybody up except for me, but I would love to listen to that song every time that I entered for the bottom of the 9th if I were ever to become a baseball closer.
And then just to kind of follow that up, because we've got a lot of footage here recently of like Aaron Rodgers at the Taylor Swift contest rocking out. So yeah. What is that guilty pleasure song that you rock out to?
Ooh, I think I'm going to keep it in the Taylor Swift vintage. I'd say probably 22 by Taylor Swift. That song is an absolute banger. I've got a young daughter and another one coming soon, and we have started to listen to quite a bit of Taylor Swift in our household. And if her dance moves are any indication, we're going to be listening to it a whole lot more going forward. So I have nothing but respect for Taylor Swift. I mean, I do have a little bit of envy for my friends that have been attending the concert over the past couple of months. And every single person that I've heard from that has been at that concert has come back with the same feedback, which is that it's the greatest concert he or she has ever been to, and that Taylor Swift is an incredible performer, 3.5 hours, 3 nights straight, every single week. She is no question not just a talented performer, but an incredibly hard worker too.
I like that take. I agree with it completely, and it is a fine guilty pleasure. Let's dive into sports. How did you get into sports? You know, how did sports develop for you as a youth, and who were some of your favorite teams and players?
Yeah, so I knew from a very, very young age that I wanted to work in sports or be in sports. I mean, I think I probably went through what most youngsters who like sports go through, which is a period of thinking I could actually be a professional athlete. That dream, I think, became simply a dream and never a reality. At a pretty young age, I realized that like I was going to have a lot of fun playing sports, but my talent was not going to match up to those who play at the professional level. But I can recall picking up a football at a young age, 5 or 6 years old. I started playing Pop Warner at a very young age, some flag football as well, obviously. And I'm from Massachusetts, which I mentioned. The Patriots, when I was very, very young, were a team on the opposite end of the spectrum compared to where they have been for the past 20 plus years. Remember back in 93, they had the first overall pick they used on Drew Bledsoe. That was when I was in kindergarten. And you get the first overall pick, of course, because you're so bad. So the Patriots, for a big portion of my youth, were not very good. But they turned things around. But I'm also the son of a Columbus, Ohio native. My mother is from Columbus, Ohio. My dad is from Honolulu, Hawaii. So I don't necessarily, like, neither one of them had professional football teams that they were closely associated with growing up. But I did become an Ohio State football fan because I had the experience to go back and visit my mom's family and go to some Ohio State games. So beyond just the local sports, Ohio State always had a special place in my heart. I don't have quite as much time to dedicate to Ohio State fandom these days as I did back when I was a kid with my current line of work. But I always enjoy watching the Buckeyes really across all sports because they have, obviously, I think most people associate them with football, but Ohio State's got an incredible athletic department that I've really enjoyed following in the past 30 or so years.
Nice.
Yes. So you spoke a little bit about, you knowing young that football maybe wasn't going to be like your professional thing, but I don't know. We're just a little research on the interwebs here, and we found out that you were a tight end / linebacker at Wesleyan University.
So actually in high school, I was a tight end and linebacker. And then in college, when the guys were bigger, I moved to safety. And the truth is that I was like a special teams player. I played very, very few snaps on defense. I think I had one start to my name. And the reason I got that start was because the normal starters, I think, skipped the team meeting the night before or something. So they got benched for a quarter. So it wasn't because I earned that start. I think it was because they had to play somebody. I don't try to create any illusions about my athletic ability at the college level. I was very, very fortunate to play football and lacrosse at the Division III level, but it was very clear that that was about the ceiling for me. So I had a great experience. I think what was evident then, still evident now, was that while I was never going to reach the professional level or even be a star player on either of those teams, I was going to be in it for the camaraderie and the people around me. And football has played truly an integral role in my life. And while I was sort of tongue in cheek in noting that I was very clearly not going to be a professional football player, I will say that it's had such an important part in sort of shaping who I've become. And I'm thankful. I think there are a lot of life lessons that can be gleaned from playing football. And while fantasy football is not quite the same thing, I feel a strong emotional attachment to the sport through fantasy football that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. So it also says here that you were basically a two-sport athlete there. You played a little bit of lacrosse as well as football in high school. So when you look at the two of them, were you a better lacrosse player or were you a better football player?
Oh, man. I think at the college level, I was probably equally insufficient. At the high school level, probably a little better as a lacrosse player. But I was not going to go pro in lacrosse either. But lacrosse and football are so different in a couple of notable ways. I would say most primarily is that football probably has, during the season, the most boring practice routine. Nobody likes to practice football because football, especially when you play in the Northeast, the second half of the season, it's cold. No one wants to tackle when it's cold. And when you're not tackling, football is a very mental sport during practice. It's we're going through plays and, we're drawing up scout team defenses or drawing up the plays that the offense is expected to run if you're a defensive player. And then in lacrosse, it's the opposite. Lacrosse, you pretty much just play the entire practice. It's also a spring sport. So in New England, you're kind of working towards the kind of weather we have today. It's going to be about 92 up here in Connecticut today, which is wonderful. But beyond that is that practice in lacrosse is a lot of shooting drills, a lot of 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, scrimmages, just sort of the fun stuff that you actually get to do during the games. So while I enjoyed both of my experiences during games, I certainly enjoyed the practices a whole lot more during lacrosse.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned accident, kind of speaking of accidents, was journalism an accident? Because we know that you work with the Patriots and the Chiefs organization. We know that you love football. Was journalism the actual goal, or did that just kind of happen?
Yeah, that was, I tell people all the time, that was the biggest accident of my professional career was journalism. I didn't study it. I went to, as you guys mentioned, Wesleyan, which is a liberal arts college. So we didn't have a communications major. It was more sort of broad stroke majors, English or psychology or economics. I was a psychology major. And the truth was that I thought I was going to be in coaching or scouting forever. And I think I have a better appreciation for the psychology major now compared to when I was in it. But the truth was that I was just trying to do a good job of with my respective courses, but I always felt like the major was sort of less important to what I thought the path of my career would be, as I knew I wanted to be in football. So journalism was really, I don't want to call it a mistake, because I know how much work goes into everybody's career, carving out a path in broadcast journalism. But when I when I decided to take a break from my scouting role with the Chiefs, I had no idea what I wanted to do. The truth, the real reason, and I wish I had a better reason that I could point to, that like there was an epiphany, or I got an offer to go to ESPN or something, and it wasn't that. The truth was that I was in my young 20s, getting to my mid 20s, and I know that is so early in your professional career, and I realize that now in my mid 30s. But I was a few years out of college, and the number of critical life events that I'd already missed was starting to weigh on me a little bit. And it was friends' weddings and reunions and graduations for people that were a couple of years behind me. And I was starting to say to myself, this is an incredibly gratifying job in a lot of ways. But was there going to be a chemical imbalance in my life that I was ignoring at the time, but one day would come back and be a detriment to me? And so I left the world of scouting to get my real estate license, which was a complete, for me, failure. It was just a total swing and a miss. I was not passionate about it, and I wasn't getting the gratification that I was getting from football work. And so I started to write a blog, which, it's funny, like nobody blogs really anymore, right? We all podcast, and we do digital video, and we do, TikTok and Instagram and things of that sort. But I started the blog, and it started to gain some traction. I kind of leveraged what was becoming a growing football feed of Twitter, which is obviously a very important medium for a lot of people in our space. And that was the start of it. It was I'm sure my readership was basically friends and family. But through a couple of lucky breaks along the way, I was able to kind of parlay it into a chance with ESPN starting back in 2012. And here we are 11 years later, still somehow, some way getting by at ESPN.
Speaking of ESPN, I mean, one of the greatest things about working there is, not only are you an NFL insider, but you got one of the biggest names there at Adam Schefter, breaking news all the time. And one of the things I kind of came across there on the Twitter feed was when Adam Schefter broke some news back, I think it was March of 2021, and it kind of ties into how you can remain professional, how professionalism is key. So how do you handle distractions? Say, I don't know, when Cisco Yates comes up and he's starting to have some distracting tendencies there during a live feed.
Yeah, so my dog Cisco, who's 3 years old, had apparently one day must have either something went down the wrong tube or he ate something he shouldn't have, which happens very often. But yeah, we were doing NFL Live, and we were this was during, I think this might have been either during like the middle of COVID or at a point where ESPN still had a lot of us working remotely. Like, I live in Connecticut, so I'm in the office a ton, but this was a day that for one reason or another, they just needed me remote at home. And Cisco came up to join me, which he often does. And he's usually a very obedient, docile dog where he just sits there and sleeps while I'm on the air. But he got up, and I think he was feeling something coming on, and he unfortunately what's the expression? Tossed his cookies while we were on the air. And you'll notice that in doing so, like as his head kind of made the gesture of what it requires to toss those cookies, he accidentally hit my equipment. And so I kind of had my camera. I'll just do it like sort of like this for a second. For those that are watching or not, if you're not watching it, it was a camera tilt there. So that happened, and it created, no one knew what happened. They just saw my camera went off tilt, and we had some fun with that after the fact. And fortunately, Cisco, being a great dog as he is, was totally fine. And he has since joined me for many more opportunities on the air. He would be here right now, except for the fact that he's getting groomed this morning. So the next time I'm on the show, he'll be a very well-groomed dog.
Speaking of distractions, hosting on television, it obviously presents a ton of challenges. You've got producers in your ear. You have, a ton of different personalities that you're handling all at once. How do you manage all of that? How do you manage, maybe specifically the different personalities that you deal with on NFL Live versus, Fantasy Focus Live? What's maybe the psychology degree comes in handy there? Because I know it's like two different worlds.
Yeah, I felt like, chemistry is one of those things that sometimes it does click automatically. But I also think that even when chemistry clicks, your trust and your understanding of each other grows over time. And so I felt like with every rep that I've had with various people at ESPN, and I'm not trying to sound like a mensch or a company man, but like I truly believe I have some of the best teammates in the world. Like it's so fun to work with so many different personalities. But I feel like over the years, I've tried to better understand of like the understanding of the various touch points, like whether it's, Daniel Dopp on the Fantasy Focus Pod or Marcus Spears on NFL Live or anybody else that I work with, it's you kind of have an understanding of like what makes them tick, and they understand what makes me tick. And I think what like the overarching theme that I kind of try to fall back upon is that I'm not saying that what we do, it's our job, it is serious in that sense. But at the end of the day, I think about the various jobs and scope of jobs that are available in this world. We've got people that are in medical professionals or teachers and lawyers and people that really do kind of keep the world on its axis. And we're so fortunate to be talking about football and having fun doing so. I don't take that for granted. And I think a lot of my colleagues are in that same category where I understand that, people listen to us for our expert opinion and analysis, but like if I get something wrong or if my prediction is off by a little bit, like it's not because the intent was to be wrong. It was because that's what makes sports so compelling, is the unpredictable nature to them. It's why you have an 8th seeded Miami Heat playing in the NBA Finals right now, as an example, or an 8th seeded Florida Panthers playing the Stanley Cup for that matter, right? Like this is kind of what makes sports so beautiful. And so I think as it pertains to like developing the chemistry with my colleagues is that so many of them I know, like they're in it for the same reason that I am, which is a genuine passion for what we do. And I would say that kind of allows me to feel comfortable knowing that, I will never put somebody, I will try my best to never put somebody in an uncomfortable spot. But the more and more we've worked together, I've learned how I can highlight them, hopefully in their greatest strengths. And they've had the ability to do the same thing for me as well.
Nice.
Can you really put Dopper in an awkward spot? I mean, I watched a guy in a Speedo washing his cars and doing laundry during the COVID situation.
Yeah, that's a great call. I had sort of blocked that memory from my brain, so now it's back. But no, you know what I love about Daniel? Many things I love about Daniel, but in a world that I think a lot of people are predisposed to fit in, Daniel decides to stand out, and he's one of one. He's totally authentically himself, and I think that's something that we should be championing very often, is people who are unique, people who are comfortable in their own skin. And if that doesn't apply to Daniel Dopp, I don't know who it applies to.
Right. Talk to us about what you've learned through fantasy sports. Like, what has it taught you about yourself?
Patience, probably. Being comfortable with being wrong, right?
Right.
Here's what I would say is the biggest thing that I've learned in fantasy sports that I think is really important, and maybe people will be disappointed to hear this, is that in our job as a fantasy analyst, I don't know what the hit rate is on your picks or your predictions or your forecasts or your rankings. I don't know the answer. I know that every week I want to say stuff that will end up being wrong.
Right.
But you have to get comfortable with the process over the results, which is a hard thing to do in fantasy football. Because if I look back on my season or seasons from years past, on a personal level, like with my teams, I will be measuring like how many championships did I win, right? That's what I mean. That's the most obvious way to measure success of a team. And yet I have to remind myself that I can't measure myself just by that, because the process could be correct. I'll use this example. is that I'm going to rank Patrick Mahomes in my rankings for quarterbacks every week ahead of Jared Goff this year, right? Every single week I will have Patrick Mahomes ahead of Jared Goff, unless like the 1985 Bears get reincarnated and they play the Chiefs and Travis Kelce and 3 offensive linemen and 2 other wide receivers are out for the Chiefs and the Lions are playing the worst defense ever, right? Like, this is not, by the way, an effort to torpedo Jared Goff. He was excellent last year. But the point is that, like, I will always rank Patrick Mahomes over Jared Goff. And yet there's a chance, a real chance, that next year, like, I don't know, 5, 6 times, Jared Goff will outscore Patrick Mahomes. It might be by 1 or 2 points in a given week. There also might be a week where Goff goes off for 32 fantasy points and Mahomes has only 18. And the question would be, was I wrong? Was I wrong for thinking that if I had the choice between Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff, I should choose Patrick Mahomes, the 2-time NFL MVP, best player on the planet? No, I wasn't wrong. So you have to get comfortable with living with the process and not being beholden to the results. The second thing that I think is really important that I've learned from fantasy football is all of us in this space know so many people that are also doing this, right? I mean, I follow so many content creators, or I'm aware of so many content creators in the fantasy football space. As I think about like trendy sleepers or breakout picks or top quarterbacks, top wide receivers, a lot of us are saying very similar things. Not identical, but a lot of similar things, right? If you go to wide receiver rankings across every platform, most people probably have in some order in their first 6 or 7 receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams. Like, if there's somebody out there right now that has Terry McLaurin as the top 5 receiver for the season, and that person ends up being right, bravo, because that's putting your neck out there and also doing so correctly. But for a lot of us, I think a lot of people do. Like, I don't know if you guys think I'm crazy for thinking that like Justin Jefferson could be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy this year. Crazy. Yeah, but it's not about necessarily having different thoughts, because you have to believe what you're saying. You have to have a credible reason for thinking what you think.
Right.
It's not about that. What it's about is, how can you do so in a way that's entertaining to your audience? So if I'm talking about Justin Jefferson and I have my sheet of paper here and I say, hey, my wide receiver rankings, I got Justin Jefferson 1 and Cooper Kupp 2, and I've got Tyreek Hill 3. That's the easiest way to get somebody to tune out. But if I can tell you exactly why I love Justin Jefferson, dynamic 24-year-old, has more receiving yards than any player in NFL history through his first, second, and third season, the best touchdown maker alive, whatever it is, a way that makes you a little more engaged, that to me is how I think you make good content creation. That's a lesson that I've learned, is it's not just what I'm saying, it's the manner in which I'm delivering it.
I love how you said that, because it feels like we're like twinning here. I mean, if I had hair and a great smile, we could almost be twins right now, the way this the whole process works out.
I love it.
Now I know you're all about, getting a good workout in from time to time. I caught a few podcasts there, but we also know that you work with a bunch of pro players there, and even when they're retired, they still want to lift from time to time. And I know you're one of the good guys out there, and you're always willing to help. So when was the last time that Damian Woody and Marcus Spears bench pressed you? And is that something you guys are still doing on the regular?
I'm retired from being bench pressed. I've decided. I'll break some news in this podcast. I am retired from being bench pressed. I also think that the dad bod might be a little more difficult to bench. It's hard to maintain that balance of trying to get physical fitness in on a regular basis when you've got a kid and soon to be 2 kids running around. So I think I'm retired from being bench pressed, but it was fun. It was good TV. And, that's sort of going back to what I was just discussing about like entertainment, is that I've been at ESPN for 10, 11 years now. And it's like, those are the kind of moments that can kind of define you. Is it's not just, like the day in which you went up there and said, I think Josh Allen is a top 5 quarterback. Like, thank you. It's and tomorrow's Wednesday, right? Like, great analysis. Like, we all know that, right? It's how do you do things that are different or unique, or how do you say things in a manner that are compelling? How do you make the case for Josh Allen differently than others have already been making the case for Josh Allen? So that to me is I don't know about the secret sauce of television, but it's a critical element of television.
So you're saying you have to get fit to get bench press? Is that what?
I gotta lose some weight. I gotta lose some weight.
Gotta lose some weight to get bench press. Is awesome.
Yeah, Field's talking about that dad bod, and I've got like 11 kids myself. I'm basically like a teeter-totter, right? There's a lot of weight in the
11?
middle of the body right now.
11 kids?
Give or take. I mean, I don't know days of the week. But yeah.
You lose count after like 5. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
So Field, give us your best advice for those of us trying to make it in this industry, and then like also how to like kind of manage our expectations when things are not necessarily going the right way or going fast as we want it to go.
Okay, so I'll attack the last part first. That it's a journey, and you better enjoy the journey and not be so focused in on like what the conclusion of the journey is, because it might take a year, it might take a decade, but it's really hard to pinpoint that. And your journey is different from my journey. It's different from every person's journey, because that's the beauty of it all, is you really have to like take solace in the journey. I feel like I could be totally misattributing this, but I think it was Blake Griffin who I heard talk about this once, where like he enjoyed the hard work to become great just as much as he enjoyed being great. Right. And I think that's an important part of anybody's journey in this industry, is you have to enjoy the hard work that goes into reaching your eventual goal. I think that the most important lesson that I can tell people is consistency. It's a content world now, and the reality is that this right here, my phone, has access to podcasts. I can make a YouTube channel. I could, start something up right now. I could do a StreamYard right now, right? Like all those things are available with one snap of my fingers and one app, basically. And then I know this sounds silly, and I'm sure I probably sound like I'm speaking to a toddler or an elementary school child when I say this, but I'm not. The fastest way, the fastest way for you to have other people lose faith in your ability is to stop believing in yourself. And I'll never forget when, I was in a critical moment, kind of like get up or get going. And it was getting close to where I realized like, maybe I have to just stop. Maybe I have to give up the dream. And I didn't. And I told myself, maybe I'm crazy, but it ended up working out. So like, I know I sound like a bumper sticker when I say this, but just keep going.
No, don't stop.
Don't stop believing.
Nice.
I mean, we could break into karaoke right now. I mean, but with that, unfortunately we have to stop because that is the end of our time for this week. I mean, Field, we appreciate you coming on the show and looking forward to doing this again when we have a little bit more questions. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours and hours. Right. I love this part here when we talk about managing expectations, bursting results when they aren't necessarily there. I mean, we could have a whole show just on that alone. We're grateful for your time, and thank you once again for joining us. Any last words?
Thank you, Ball, for having me on, and thank you for getting up early, and just keep going. I promise you it'll all be worth it in the end. All right, for Major, for Tara, for Field, I'm Matt Donnelly, and this has been Behind the Grind.